I've really struggled to write this video's script. I feel the topic of discussing the bloated cast of RWBY is worth mentioning, but I've also had issues figuring out where to start and what the point of the video should be. Basically, this video boils down to, there are too many characters in RWBY, but I couldn't figure out why I cared so much. Well, after some contemplation, I finally figured that out, so I'm gonna take some time to go over what makes RWBY's large cast such a problem, how it's affected the story and characters, and go over the benefits to trimming it down. Let's go! Large casts are par for the course with anime, especially shonen anime, so why am I and so many others getting all up in arms about RWBY's bloated character roster, while things like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z seem to get a pass? Well, there are two factors in it. 1. RWBY introduces characters way quicker than its contemporaries. Let's look at the original Sailor Moon anime for comparison. Sailor Mercury is the first one to join Usagi in the group. She's not introduced to the show until episode 8. For 8 episodes, we're just following the titular character, Luna, Tuxedo Mask, and the villains. And then the next Sailor Scout doesn't appear until episode 10. There's a bunch of Sailor Senshi, but they're introduced to us in a staggered way. We get to spend plenty of time with each one before a new member of the team is introduced. In comparison, by episode 8, RWBY has introduced 12 important characters. Hell, by episode 2, we have 7 recurring good guys introduced to us. This is a big reason as to why people don't like how large RWBY's ensemble is. They just throw every character at us in rapid succession without giving any of them screen time. This results in stuff like Ren being little more than a background character for 4 years, and Yang doing nothing important before getting her arm chopped off. The sheer amount of people being thrown at us means none of them have time to get established or develop before we're getting introduced to another one. But this isn't the only issue RWBY has. There's another problem with the big cast. Number 2. Everyone is presented as important. In RWBY, what happens more often than not is that a character will be introduced with a lot of pomp and circumstance, implying they're gonna be an important member of the story, and then they'll just disappear and never return. Remember when Cardin was presented as an important threat? Remember how Sage and Scarlet were in Volume 2's opening despite only making brief appearances in one episode of Volume 3? Remember how Team Coffee showed up just to steal the spotlight for Volume 2's finale and only returned to fill out the roster of the tournament? This is a constant in RWBY, where every single character is given to the audience like they're worth caring about, just to ultimately waste screen time that could have, and should have, been for the actual heroes of the show, and then get tossed aside forever. There are 90 named characters in RWBY. To put that into perspective, there are only 52 Z-Fighters in Dragon Ball. But you know, those numbers aren't quite accurate. Yeah, there may be 52 Z-Fighters, but Turtle certainly isn't doing anything important and no one's pretending they are. And there may be 90 named characters in RWBY, but like, half of those are the participants of the Vital Festival. We never thought they'd be coming back. So let's cull those numbers a bit. Of the 52 Z-Fighters, 28 of them are important, recurring characters of the cast. That's still a lot, but not as much as RWBY. RWBY has presented us with 38 heroes that are implied to be pivotal to the story. Let's all keep in mind that Goku's collected all those friends over the course of 34 years. RWBY's racked up 10 more important characters in only 6. And that's not including the fuckload of villains. But I think we should still be fair. While the show presents everyone as vital to the plot, we all know that some of these characters aren't actually all that necessary. So let's just ignore all that build-up around people like Glinda and Winter, and take a look at the characters who have actually made an impact to the story. That's still 21! I have to keep coming up with these caveats to trim down the cast to an acceptable size. Oh, of the 21 important, actually recurring good guys who have impacted the plot, only 13 are still alive. I shouldn't have to do that. Especially since the showrunners don't seem to know who's important or not. Team Coffee come out of nowhere, did one cool thing and vanished, but they're getting a light novel? Oscar is added to the cast as a deuteragonist and is playing a pivotal role in the plot, but we never get to see him develop on screen? Neo disappears for years and is then just brought back out of the blue and we're all supposed to care about her now? Penny helped push the plot forward while also helping RWBY develop, and she's just an afterthought when talking about Pyrrha's death? It's a cast full of characters we're told to think are worth a damn, while in reality every character just shows up long enough to do something in place of the actual protagonists, and then are thrown out of the show to do nothing more than be a character in a mobile game. So with all that established, let's look at... As previously mentioned, every character is presented as important, which has caused this dilemma where there are way too many people active in the plot. The list of characters we need to keep track of and expect to make a meaningful impact on the story is massive. Ruby, Weiss, Blake, Yang, Jean, Ren, Nora, Oscar, Crow, Maria, Ozpin, Salem, Watts, Tyrion, Hazel, Cinder, Emerald, Mercury, Neo, Raven, Ironwood, Jacques, and that's not even including the slew of essential characters who are family, have been left behind, or are dead. The show's got like 7 deuterogonists. We already have 4 main protagonists to try to squeeze some development out of. Why also bloat the cast with so many B characters? Especially since RT divvies out its runtime in such a weird way. Team RWBY are treated like one entity who all have to share their runtime. Yang doesn't do anything in Volume 1, but Team RWBY got to have adventures in the forest and deal with the White Fang. Yang was excluded, but it's like the directors don't care because Team RWBY in some degree was involved. But then they slot out chunks of time for each individual deuterogonist? Why turn the spotlight away from our protagonists so often and for so many different people? This creates a situation where our heroes only are given enough time to drag the plot forward, while the B cast are only given enough time to develop during the story's lulls. The B characters are wholly unimportant to the story, but the protagonists are never given the time to become fleshed out or develop personally. With the huge amount of people, the writers don't know who to prioritize or develop during a volume. Everyone gets a chance to shine, but at the cost of the 4 main characters having to wait their turn. Don't get me wrong, it's a good thing to care about the supporting cast and to let them grow as well. But since it's so big, we spend whole volumes with some of the main girls doing little to nothing, as the B characters take charge over and over again for the brief moments they get to take precedent. And this is not a problem unique to the heroes. First, if we're gonna mention the bad guys, we should probably also point out how fucking many there are. There are 8 main villains. Even if we cut out all the deuterogonists and only follow Team RWBY's adventures, that would mean there'd be 12 central people to keep track of. But since we don't have the luxury of cutting out Juniper and the others, this show has a main cast consisting of 19 characters. The villains double how many people we need to care about and expect to impact the plot. But the real kicker is, they never do. Salem is uninvolved with the heroes, with the most active she got being her killing one of her subordinates. Tyrion and Hazel were presented as threats, but just ran back home to hide after losing once. Watts has done literally nothing for 3 years. Neo has no character outside of looking either pissy or sad, and hasn't even seen the heroes after her return. And Mercury does so little, has so little agency in his actions, and has so little character that he could be replaced with one of Junior's goons and nothing would change from the show. Most of the villains are just the idea of a threat sitting around a gloomy castle. Cinder is the only central villain actively doing shit, and Emerald's the only central villain who's been allowed to develop. But how could this be? With so many bad guys, why haven't they been used more? Because they keep just adding throwaway villains to the show. There may be 8 main villains, but the show has had 23 different antagonists. Why? Why present Team Cardinal like they're gonna be a recurring problem for Jean and the others? Why throw Fennec, Corsic, and Ilya at Blake while she's at Menagerie, rather than just have her face Adam while there? On that note, why give Blake a personal antagonist in Adam that just forces her to ignore the central conflict of Team Witch? Why make up a shitty lieutenant for Weiss to face on the train, rather than give her an important character to fight? Why introduce Leo just to have him die after getting maybe 40 minutes of screen time? Why introduce Cordo into the cast when she does nothing for the story, and whose role could have been filled with any number of already established characters? They're constantly ignoring their own antagonists to instead shower the heroes in one-off bad guys for no reason. It's the exact same problem as the protagonists, complete with the directors not knowing who should be taking center stage. Why is Emerald the only villain allowed to grow or show remorse? She's one of the least important characters to the story, but gets to develop because she's cute? Meanwhile, despite all her screen time, Cinder is the exact same as when the show first started because she's evil? Their priorities and character development seem totally beholden to what the fans cry about the most, and whoever is the newest addition to the cast. Miles and Carrie seem infinitely more interested in introducing and exploring their new characters they came up with, rather than utilizing the ones already established in the show, only seeming to waver to appease fans' outcry for more fan service. And all this comes together to create an ensemble that's hard to care about. Their designs being cool is the biggest thing that influences which ones are my favorite. No one gets the proper amount of screen time to allow these kids to really grow, with the exception of Jean and Pyrrha. And any arcs the main cast actually get to have make no impact on their character. Lost an arm and didn't change. Abused by her father and didn't change. The group are the same characters as they were introduced to us as, little more than a handful of archetypes. Even after 6 years of the show running, Ruby's still naive and innocent, Weiss is still cold and proper, Blake is still standoffish and melancholic, Yang is still hot-headed and confident. The only way these kids are allowed to change is their outfits. Meanwhile, all that time that could have been given to offer the group some development was instead used to introduce useless character after character over and over and over again. Well, the long and short of it is that they need to trim down the cast, and while the simplest solution is kill off the superfluous characters, that's also a pretty short-sighted way of going about it. So what are some ways they could trim the fat without just nuking the school? Option 1. Have some characters stay behind. Maria by all means shouldn't accompany the kids after Atlas, and really there's no reason for her to stick around too long anyway. And she's not the only one who could choose to sit out the adventure, at least for a while. Crow could also call it quits while in Atlas. Maybe he chooses to stay and help Ironwood. Maybe he decides to get some help with his alcohol dependency. An excuse could be made for any number of the cast to leave the adventuring party. Doing this would allow the 4 main girls some elbow room to grow while also keeping the others left behind on standby in case they're needed in the future. And this isn't just a solution for the heroes. With their constant hinting at Emerald switching sides, giving her, and maybe also Mercury, a good reason to ditch the Council of Evil could not only offer the two a chance to develop a little, but also make room for the real bad guys to take center stage. Option 2. Split up the group. The adventures at Brunswick Farm proved that separating Juniper from the main plot allowed for way more development and socializing within the group. RT could have the kids divide and conquer. Jean, Ren, and Nora could go off with Oscar to handle something elsewhere, while Team RWBY continues working on delivering the relic to a safe location. Jean, Ren, and Nora leave to help with the reconstruction of Beacon, Crow and Oscar take over the responsibilities of the lamp, and Team RWBY head off to find the next relic. Simply dividing the cast into bite-sized chunks would help with allowing everyone to get involved without crowding the screen with one-liners. Option 3. Kill some people. While not the best solution, character deaths can be beneficial. Let's say the heroes get jumped by Cinder and Neo. If Neo managed to kill off Maria, it allowed the protagonist more motivation to want to take Neo down, other than just her being the antagonist's lackey. It would give the audience a reason to dislike Neo, and it would make space in the cast. But really, the best use of the murder button is against the villains. Adam's not a problem anymore, neither is Leo. Killing bad guys gives the heroes a victory, if done well, while also lowering the ensemble's numbers. Not to mention that if the girls start picking off the Council of Evil, that gives the remaining villains a reason to seek the hero's defeat, other than just, one of them's got silver eyes, I guess. And really the final element to make any of these options work? Stop introducing more superfluous characters! We don't need a cartoon villain to fend off the girls when we could have had Watts be the one trying to stop them. We don't need Leo dicking around Haven if he's gonna do nothing important throughout his minimal screen time. We don't need a quirky old woman to join the cast when RWBY can learn about her eyes from the ancient professor and the uncle who was on the same team as her mom who also had silver eyes. The RWBY crew need to stop introducing new people to the story when they could be utilizing the horde of them already in the lineup. Here's a minor example of how it could be beneficial to bring back pre-established characters over making up new ones. Dee and Dudley. These two are dumb and offer nothing interesting or important to the cast, but a commenter named Douglas Rosa offered a solution to that. Why not replace them with Cardin and one of his teammates? Suddenly, without changing anything about these two nobodies, they matter and the audience cares about them. Them trying to shake down the heroes for extra cash is a fun look at how their shitty attitudes carried over from their time at Beacon. It would offer Jean and his team a chance to confront his old bullies. Dee dying made no impact on the audience, but if it had been Cardin, suddenly that matters! A guy we all knew got offed by a Grimm. How would that affect the heroes who hated him previously? The onslaught of new characters means none of them matter to us, unless the fans latch on to one with a cute design. Utilizing the established cast puts more weight on the ensemble, while also allowing the main protagonists more opportunities for growth or reflection. This show could really benefit by trimming down the crew and allowing them to be more than a couple of sentences before disappearing. It would offer more time to see our heroes mature, it would unclutter the amount of people we need to focus on, and it would allow the writers to produce tighter, more thought-out scripts. Without a shitload of kids to keep track of, the writers would be able to delve deeper into motivation, characterization, and story progression without being bogged down by having to keep everyone included. While I do like most of the characters, I think it's time to say goodbye to all the ones we don't need in the story anymore. Hey, friendly reminder that we have a Patreon now. If you like what we do here and want to support us, we'd really appreciate it. If you don't have money to spare but still want to help out, simply liking and sharing this video does a lot for us too. Thank you!